So it wouldn't be a January if I didn't talk about 1099s, especially this deep into the month of January, because we're probably rolling up our sleeves at this point and knee deep in it. 1099s are the bane of our existence, I'm going to say. I used to be in the old days, the tax person would handle them, and I would be like, yeah, it's a tax return. Let the tax person handle them. And now the tax people are going, we don't want it. Give it to the bookkeeper. Nobody wants them. They're that hot potato that bounces from person to person. But when you work with attorney clients, you have to understand how to report these, and it's critical. I find a lot of bookkeepers, we usually do some sessions on it in the law lab because there's a lot of questions around whether attorney payments should be reported on a 1099 miscellaneous as opposed to 1099 NEC. We get questions even from our own staff like, hey, they bought shoes. Is that a 1099? I'm like, it's got to be about a service. So I hope that made you all laugh, but that's sometimes the questions we get. But anyway, determining who gets a 1099, basically any payments to attorneys of $600 or more during the trade of business must be reported, whether or not the attorney is incorporated or not. So the rules around attorneys and law firms is different than the traditional rule. Like if my company, Artisani Accounting, is incorporated, I don't need a 1099. The proper trust is an LLC, would get a 1099. So that's the difference. If we were a law firm, both those firms would both get 1099s. So that's a different rule around law firms. So payroll payments for legal services. So even if a law firm hires another law firm to represent them, that would put them on the 1099 miscellaneous attorney box category. But if they hired a law firm to work as co-counsel, that would fall into the 1099 NEC box. See how this can be different and confusing? So any gross proceeds for legal settlements are usually reported on a Form 1099 miscellaneous. It's box number 10. So other contractors and vendors, you identify those independent contractors that were paid more than $600 during a year of service. And there's rules around how they were paid, which is why I like to encourage people to use the contractor feature in QuickBooks or use Gusto's contractor feature so you don't have to really deal with all this stuff. But if you do, and they had client paid with cash or check, you have to track it and you're going to have to send a 1099. The exclusion is to any C Corps or S Corps, unless they fall under a special reporting requirement, which is if they're an attorney. So use the correct form. So a 1099 NEC is the form that's used to report non-employee compensation. Cleaning lady comes into my office and cleans my office. I pay her more than $600 and she's just a sole proprietor. I have to give her 1099 for all the services that I pay to her by check. That's an example of a 1099 NEC. I'm hiring a non-employee to come in here. She picks the day, she does the work, lots of rules around that, and she's going to get a 1099 from me. Now, the 1099 miscellaneous would go to paying for the attorney for gross proceeds, like a settlement, and some other miscellaneous payments go on the miscellaneous as well, like rent, prizes. So there's a lot of different 1099s, so you just know that they are there. You should be collecting a W-9 form. My cleaning lady comes here. I have a 1099 W-9 form from her that has her Social Security because that's how she does her sole proprietorship. Many times they're going to fill out a TIN or taxpayer identification number. For example, for the proper trust, where you give you a 1099 with that number on it, and then that would indicate to the client, to the person that's hired us, that's our number to give us our 1099 form. Now you want to do TIN matching. So you want to make sure that you use the IRS's TIN matching program, make sure that you actually have the right taxpayer ID that matches up with the IRS's records. Otherwise, you're going to have problems as you process these. And really the key to this season being a more fluid and happy season is to track these payments throughout the year. You don't pay anybody till you get that W-9 form. And or you pay people by credit card instead of paying them by cash. If you pay them by credit card and they use a third-party processor, those aren't filed on a 1099. Their payment provider will do that on a 1099-K. So only really the cash, check, ACH, direct deposit payments, those are the ones that are required for us to file a 1099 for a client. So the filing deadlines, I just want to this is really high level and really a generalized blog. I've written some really detailed ones in the past, so hopefully I can link back to those. 1099 NEC, it must be filed with the IRS and provided to the recipients by January 31st. Most of the services, I believe QuickBooks kind of closes down the 28th, so you have to have that in before then so that it's processed by the 31st. 1099 miscellaneous forms must be sent to the recipient by January 31st, but the IRS has to have their filing by February 28th. And if you're e-filing, it's March 28th. So paper filing, hopefully you're not paper filing, but if you are, that's February 28th. Penalties for late filing and incorrect, you can get penalties for late filing, incorrect information, or failure to file. So ensure that the forms are completed accurately and submitted on time, really to avoid any fines. So when you talk about settlements, legal settlements is where you report on a 1099, report gross proceeds, the entire settlement amount paid to an attorney on Form 1099 miscellaneous, regardless of how much the attorney keeps for a fee. So the whole amount goes to the attorney, and then they have their own paperwork to do on their side of it. You want to communicate and clarify with any clients what their requirements are. So as you have these clients, you want to clarify if you're doing the 1099s for them, and make sure that the client, your attorney client, understands which payments and vendors require a 1099 and where the documents are going to be stored. We like Keeper for this. So we use Keeper layered on top of our QuickBooks, and it actually pushes the data into QuickBooks, but electronically I can add to it. So I can electronically ask somebody for their W-9 and they can fill it out really securely. And it actually, when they send it back, it gets put into your QuickBooks, which is wonderful. QuickBooks is masking those numbers, so it makes it a little harder if you're going to use like Track 1099 to process your 1099s instead of QuickBooks. You can do that. If you have QuickBooks, a client with QuickBooks and QuickBooks Payroll, it is free to process the 1099s. It's part of what you're paying for. It's not exactly free, but it's included in your payroll service. So you might want to process them through Intuit. This year it's new. You can process corrections and state filings. So that was one of the weaknesses of QuickBooks is pay 1099s last year. This year it's changed, so it's better. And the penalties, I kind of go into detail in the article that's attached here for the penalties, but they can range from anywhere between $50 to $270 per form. And speaking of which, if you are doing this work for a client, make sure you charge for this. It's usually a loss leader if you don't charge enough. Consider a fee like $250 setup fee, and then maybe $25 to $30 per filed form. Get that agreed to in writing before you actually do the work for a client. And because it does take time to get these W-9s if they weren't collected during the year, and making the phone calls. I need this information when people ignore your request for a W-9. That's why it's always important to get them before they get paid. So it's something to consider as you start to do this work. And it's not a fun job. It's a task like no other at the end of the year, in January, when we're already busy enough as it is finishing up the year for clients. But I wanted to at least bring this topic up again, revisit it, hopefully get it retagged somewhere so that you can see the other in-depth articles. Make sure you stay up to date on it, though. If we pull some old articles to link back here, make sure you're aware that the rules change every year. So you want to really look at the rules in the irs.gov, and then also kind of rely on what we have here too for information. But the rules do change every year. I've seen it happen over and over again. So I hope that's helpful. Until next week, bye now.